are these people?
Politics of Survival. I'm your host, Reade. How is everyone tonight? I have a super special guest, and I have admired him for a very long time. His name is Jeffery Ventre, and he has quite a background. He's a medical doctor, but he also, you may have know him also from the movie Blackfish and being a whistleblower regarding SeaWorld. So I'll let Jeffery talk about that. Welcome, Jeffery. It's nice to have you.
Thanks, Tara. It's great to be on the show.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have a lot of things in common besides following each other on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
We're both in the Pacific Northwest. We both have a love of the oceans. And I mentioned to you before we came on that I was an intern before I worked for other members of Congress. I worked for Leon Panetta, and the main issue that I was involved with, that I took notes with and went to hearings, was about the Marine Sanctuary Act and protecting the coastline along the California coast and the mammals, the satians that habitat dolphins and whales, and very close to my heart. So I appreciate all the work that you do. And yeah, if you could tell the audience a little bit about who you are and your journey that led you, to SeaWorld and beyond.
Yeah, back in the 80s when I was going to college, SeaWorld has controlled the narrative basically about what they are and what they do, basically until Blackfish came out and Death at SeaWorld. But the media painted a very different picture that SeaWorld helped craft, of them doing a lot of research and so forth. So I attended Florida State University and wanted to have a cool job. I loved animals. I grew up with horses. We used to swim the horses in the lake that we lived on, and I loved large marine mammals. And so with a biology background, I was like, I really don't want to work in a lab somewhere. I thought it would be cool to work with animals in a place where I thought there was more research going on than actually was. And I was from Florida, and ended up being one of a few people that got hired after like a swim test and an interview at SeaWorld in Orlando. And I got to work at the time, there were 4 animal training stadiums there. There was the Shamu Stadium and the Whale and Dolphin Stadium and the Pinniped Stadium, which was sea lions and walruses, and then there was a SeaWorld Theater. And so I had this experience, and when I got in there, I thought that there was going to be a lot more science going on, but really what it was a kind of a marine version of the circus. And we kind of sarcastically refer to SeaWorld as the Sea Circus. But when you first start working there, you're just kind of so humbled that you got the job. There's like a year or two of a honeymoon phase where you are just stoked, and you're out there doing live public performances and working with these incredible animals. I mean, the first time I got into a water with a killer whale, it was something that I'll never forget. And also swimming with belugas and false killer whales. I spent 7 of my 8 years at SeaWorld working with marine mammals, but then you start to realize that the animals are paying a huge price. For example, 8 years, I did work with Tilikum. He was, over 20 feet long and 12,000 pounds, and the pool that he was in was only 33 feet deep, and that was the show pool. The other pools weren't even as deep as he was long, and so you get to see some of the shortcomings of captivity, especially for free ranging animals. And if you go to a zoo, which I don't do, you notice these stereotypic behaviors that most large mammals exhibit, like big cats will pace back and forth. Even horses
Mhm.
will crib in their
Yes.
in their stalls. That's a stereotypy.
Weaving,
Killer,
weaving, they call it with horses. Yeah, when they weave back and forth.
yeah,
Yeah.
gorillas. And
Mhm.
so a lot of these animals are wide ranging, and they just don't do well in captivity. I knew I needed to go back to school. I first uh, became a chiropractor in Portland. That's what got me out
Mhm.
to the Pacific Northwest, and practiced in Portland for 3 years. Then I went back to med school, where I
Mhm.
became a physical medicine physician. I was in New Orleans doing my residency in 2010 in February,
Mhm.
and my former colleague John Jett texted me and said someone's been killed at SeaWorld.
Wow.
Um, and I still knew most of the senior people there, because it takes a while
Mhm.
to get to the point where you're doing water work with killer whales and doing the show performances, and that was kind of the level that I was at. And so we were trying to figure out who it might be, and it turned out it was Don Brancho. And
Mhm.
so I was in New Orleans. I don't know if you remember in Blackfish, there was a scene from 2006 when Ken Peters got dragged down to the bottom of the
Oh,
pool
right, right,
with
right. Okay.
Kasaka.
Mhm.
Yeah, I got a call regarding that in 2006, and I was still in med school, and I'm like, I'm not going to get involved with this. This is
Mhm.
too much of a distraction. You know, I've got to stay
Oh my gosh,
focused.
you were in med school. That's
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Well, fast forward to 2010, I was in
Yeah.
residency
Mhm.
and at LSU in New
Mhm.
Orleans, and so I get a call from the producer of Anderson Cooper's show, because they had my number from before
Mhm. Mhm.
when I said no, and they called back and said, you want to be on AC 360 tonight. And I
Mhm.
thought about it. I'm like, it was the same thought process that went through my mind. I said, not really. I don't want to go down this. I don't
Yeah.
want to go there. It's, you know, a
Yeah.
lot of, because you know what's coming, right? And
Yeah.
so you especially know what's coming. And so
Yes.
I talked to Michelle, my significant other. I talked to my sister, and I talked to
Mhm.
John Jett, the guy that texted me, and they go, dude, we've been talking about the problems with captivity for a long time. Like, kind of,
Right.
you have to say something. And so
Mhm.
I initially said no to the show producer, and so I missed out on the opportunity to get picked up and brought to the studio in downtown New Orleans. But they did call me, you know, on my iPhone, and we did
Mhm.
the interview, and they put pictures on the AC 360 show that night. And
Okay.
I got to say, look, I was worried that there was talk of putting Tilikum down. And I was just saying, it's not the animal's fault. You know, this is an
Right.
animal that deserves to live, because there was kind of an outcry to put him down.
Mhm.
What that did though was it alerted the other news, like CBS News, and I started to get, like, it snowballed from that. So I was on
Right.
CBS Early Show and did a couple shows like that, and then John, the guy that, and anyway, snowballed, and we John Jett and I felt a little bit isolated, and we didn't want to get a lawsuit slapped against us. So we
Yeah.
told a couple more trainers and just tried to expand the
Mhm.
field, so to speak. There was safety in numbers.
Yeah.
And then there was a guy named Tim Zimmerman from Outside Magazine. He was still an author, a
Mhm.
journalist, and he wrote us a feature piece called Killer in the Pool. And then
Mhm.
that got read by Gabriella Cowperthwaite, who's now directing movies and, you know, dramatic films in Hollywood because of
Mhm.
Blackfish. And she came to my first Superpod event in San Juan Islands and got most of the interviews there,
Mhm.
and then put Blackfish together. And it was well researched. There was an OSHA trial that I was involved with as a witness, and
You were an
John Jett.
expert witness for that?
I wasn't. I don't know if I was called an expert witness. I got served,
Mhm.
and they didn't call
Oh,
me to
subpoenaed. Mhm.
yeah, I got subpoenaed while in New Orleans, and I provided a written statement,
Oh, okay.
and
Okay.
I was happy because I was living in New Orleans. The trial was in Sanford, Florida, so I provided a written testimony and didn't have to be called up onto the stand. But anyway, the trial was in two parts. It lasted a week,
Mhm.
and then they postponed it and finished it like 6 months later. And then John and I got involved with writing several peer-reviewed scientific pieces on the topic. We wrote about survival. We wrote about the teeth damage that occurs to the whales. We wrote about two of the whales
Mhm.
that died from West Nile virus and St. Louis virus encephalitis because they were bitten by mosquitoes, because killer whales in captive environments
Right.
sit there with their backs above the water pretty much all
Mhm.
night long logging, and mosquitoes are attracted to CO2 and black surfaces, so they just get drilled by mosquitoes all night, especially
Oh.
it it was two big males, Taku in
Mhm.
2007 and Kanduk in 1990, that were killed by mosquito vectors. So we wrote a scientific
Oh.
paper. We wrote a paper on that. We wrote a paper on the teeth damage that occurs
Mhm.
to captive orcas, because like horses or like other animals, they exhibit these stereotypies. And one of the things that they do is they neurotically will like kind of open their mouth and grind their teeth on the concrete corners of the pool. And they will also face off across two gates and chomp at each other, like kind of like a threat display. And sometimes
Oh.
they'll knock their teeth off or chip their teeth off.
Oh,
And so
wow.
the vets then have to come in, and inside of their teeth are shaped like upside down ice cream cones. And when they
Mhm,
pop
mhm.
off the tip, it leaves a fleshy pulp that then becomes almost ubiquitous, almost always infected. So the vets come in with a little drill, and they drill out the core of the pulp, the fleshy pulp of the tooth. And then
Mhm.
the trainers are asked to flush their teeth out 2 to 3 times a day with a saline betadine type solution when I was there at SeaWorld in Florida. And we take basically a fancy water pick and push it down into the upside down ice cream cone teeth, and it upwells like fish roe and particles of.
And they allowed you to do this.
They not only allowed us to do it, it kept the animals alive. Because what happens is these fish roe and these bacterial particles get
Mhm.
down into the jaw, which is highly vascularized, and
Mhm.
then it creates little bacterial implants that travel through the bloodstream. And I think is the main cause of killer whale deaths at SeaWorld, even though they call all of them pneumonia. I think a lot of it is seeded from their teeth.
Right.
You know how sometimes even in human dentistry, if you go to
Mhm.
have major teeth work done, they'll sometimes give
Yeah.
you Keflex or an antibiotic to prevent you from
Right. Mhm.
becoming septic. So the same thing happens with killer whales, but SeaWorld, like all, powerful corporations, takes this and spins it into such a way where they say, look at our superior dental care. Killer whales in the wild do not get this type of dental care.
Oh, because
And
they don't need it. It's like
that's right.
with, yeah, it's like wild horses when they talk about
Yeah.
hoof care. Wild horses don't need hoof care because they're running down their hooves and whatnot. Yeah.
Yes.